I'll never forget the way my son smiled when he betrayed me. Not a nervous smile, not an apologetic one. A smug, self-satisfied grin as he raised his champagne flute across the rehearsal dinner table. "To Mom," Ralph announced to his fiancée's family, who were virtual strangers to me despite the impending marriage. "Thanks for the wedding gift. We couldn't have done it without you." Confused murmurs and polite applause rippled through the oceanfront restaurant. I kept my expression neutral, years of boardroom negotiations serving me well as I tried to decipher his meaning. What wedding gift? I'd offered to contribute $10,000 toward their celebration, a generous sum by any standard, though apparently insufficient for Ralph and Alexis's champagne tastes. Alexis giggled, her diamond engagement ring catching the candlelight as she clutched my son's arm. "We should tell her," she stage whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell me what?" I asked, maintaining my smile even as unease crawled up my spine. Ralph clinked his knife against his glass again, commanding the attention of all 30 guests at the rehearsal dinner. "As you all know, Alexis and I have been planning the wedding of our dreams, the Rosewood Resort, gourmet menu, top-shelf everything, because my beautiful bride deserves nothing less." He paused for appreciative murmurs. "But quality comes with a price tag. In this case, about $100,000. The room hummed with impressed whispers. I nearly choked on my water. $100,000? I'd seen the early estimates around $60,000, which had already seemed extravagant. "So," Ralph continued, "we had to get creative with financing. That's when I remembered Mom's little beach cottage in the Hamptons. You know, the one she visits maybe twice a year." My heart stopped. The beach house, my sanctuary. The place I'd purchased after my divorce, my reward for 20 years in a loveless marriage to Ralph's father. The only extravagance I'd ever allowed myself. "Ralph," I said sharply, my smile evaporating. "What are you saying?" "We sold it," Alexis interjected gleefully. "Last month. The market's hot right now. We got almost twice what you paid for it 15 years ago." The room swam before my eyes. "You sold my house?" Ralph laughed as if I'd made a joke. "Technically, Mom. But come on. We all know you were planning to leave it to me anyway. We just accelerated the timeline a bit." "A bit?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "How did you even... Remember when you were sick last winter and I helped with your paperwork? I held on to that power of attorney. Figured it might come in handy someday." He winked at his future father-in-law, who chuckled appreciatively at my son's resourcefulness. "That was for medical decisions," I managed, my throat constricting. "Not for... Anyway," Ralph continued, raising his glass higher, "let's toast to Mom's incredible wedding gift. The best part is, she didn't even have to shop for it." Laughter rippled through the crowd as glasses clinked. Only Alexis's mother seemed to sense something wrong, her eyes darting uncomfortably between my frozen face and her daughter's triumphant one. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me," I murmured, heading for the restroom on legs that threatened to buckle with each step. Once alone, I gripped the marble countertop, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Judith Campbell, 58, CEO of Campbell Enterprises, reduced to trembling shock by her own child. The beach house, my beach house, sold without my knowledge or consent to fund an obscenely expensive wedding for a son who clearly saw me as nothing more than an ATM with maternal instincts. I splashed cold water on my face, letting the shock crystallize into something harder, something I'd never allowed myself to feel toward Ralph before. Cold, calculating anger. Because there was something my darling son didn't know. Something that would wipe that smug smile off his face and possibly destroy the wedding he'd so callously funded with my property. The beach house wasn't actually in my name. For tax purposes, I'd transferred ownership to Campbell Enterprises years ago. A detail buried in paperwork Ralph wouldn't have had access to, even with that expired power of attorney he'd held on to. Legally, he hadn't sold his mother's beach house. He'd fraudulently sold corporate property belonging to a limited liability company. My company. I straightened my jacket and reapplied my lipstick, a plan already forming. I had raised my son to believe he was entitled to everything I had, and that was my mistake. But I wouldn't compound it by letting him steal from me. When I returned to the table, I wore a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "To the happy couple," I said, raising my glass. "May you get exactly what you deserve." The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I called in sick to my own office for the first time in 15 years. My executive assistant, Barbara, knew me well enough not to question it, though concern colored her voice. "Everything all right, Judith? You never miss work." "Just taking a personal day, Barbara," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "Could you send me the file on the Hamptons property? And connect me with Marcus in legal, please?" While waiting for the files, I poured myself a strong cup of coffee and settled at my home office desk. The numbness of last night had worn off, replaced by a simmering fury I hardly recognized in myself. I had always been the peacekeeper, the provider, the one who smoothed things over when Ralph's father had been unreasonable during the divorce. When had that translated into becoming a doormat? My laptop pinged with an incoming email from Barbara containing the property documents. I scanned them quickly, confirming what I already knew. The beach house had been legally transferred to Campbell Enterprises 5 years ago as part of my tax strategy. Ralph's name appeared nowhere on the deed. The phone rang, Marcus returning my call. "Morning, Judith. Barbara said it's urgent?" "Marcus, I need your complete discretion on this," I began, then laid out the situation in clinical terms, as if discussing a case of corporate fraud rather than my son's betrayal. Marcus's low whistle echoed through the speakerphone. "That's actually several crimes. Fraud, forgery, possibly elder abuse given the circumstances." "I'm hardly elderly," I said dryly. "Legally speaking, taking advantage of a parent over 55 qualifies. But the main issue here is the fraudulent sale of corporate property. Have you confirmed the sale actually went through?" "Not yet. That's my next call." "Don't make it," Marcus advised. "Let me handle this from the legal side. If your son used a falsified power of attorney to sell property belonging to Campbell Enterprises, we need to move quickly to void the transaction and notify the buyer." "And my son?" I asked, my voice catching despite my resolve. Marcus paused. "Judith, I have to be clear. What you're describing is criminal activity. If we move to protect the company's assets, which we should, Ralph could face serious charges." I closed my eyes, imagining Ralph in handcuffs. Despite everything, my maternal instinct reared up, urging me to protect him, to find another way. Then I remembered his smug smile, the casual way he'd announced stealing my sanctuary, the gleeful participation of his fiancée. "Do what's necessary to protect the company," I said finally. "I'll handle the personal side." After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the wedding invitation propped on my desk. Ivory cardstock with gold embossing, announcing the union of Ralph Campbell and Alexis Thornton. 3 days from now, $100,000 of stolen money. My phone buzzed with a text from Ralph. "Found you the perfect mother of the groom dress at Nordstrom. Sending it over with alterations lady this afternoon. Don't worry about the cost. Don't worry about the cost." As if I hadn't been subsidizing his entire life. College tuition at Yale, the down payment on his Manhattan apartment, the lease on his BMW, the credit card bills that somehow always ended up being my responsibility when he came up short at the end of the month. I'd done it all willingly, telling myself it was what mothers did, what mothers who could afford it should do. What a fool I'd been. My phone rang again, an unfamiliar number with a Hamptons area code. "Mrs. Campbell, this is Richard Oakes from Eastern Shore Realty. I'm calling about the closing on your beach property. There seems to be a discrepancy with some of the paperwork, and we need to—" "Mr. Oakes," I interrupted, "I'm aware of the situation. You should know that the sale was fraudulent. My son had no legal authority to sell that property, as it belongs to my company, not to me personally. You'll be hearing from our corporate counsel shortly." Silence stretched across the line. I see. This is highly irregular, Mrs. Campbell. The buyers have already wired the funds and are expecting to take possession next week. That's unfortunate for them, but the sale is invalid. The property was never mine to sell, or my son's. With all due respect, Mrs. Campbell, your son provided a power of attorney and a falsified document for a property that wasn't in my personal portfolio. I cut in sharply. Would you like to be named as a co-defendant in the fraud case, Mr. Oakes? Because I'm happy to add you if you facilitated this transaction without proper due diligence. More silence then. I'll await contact from your attorneys. After hanging up, I pulled out a legal pad and began making a list. Bank accounts to freeze, credit cards to cancel, trust disbursements to halt. If Ralph wanted financial independence, I would grant it to him, completely and irrevocably. My phone buzzed again with another text from my son. "BTW, can you make the final payment to the Rosewood tomorrow? $50K due before the rehearsal. I stared at the message, marveling at his audacity. Not only had he stolen from me, but he expected me to continue funding his extravagance. Instead of responding, I opened my laptop and began typing an email to the wedding planner, venue, caterer, and every vendor listed on the elaborate spreadsheet Ralph had shared months ago when he'd first started keeping me in the loop on wedding plans. To whom it may concern, I am writing to inform you that contrary to what you may have been told, I will not be financially responsible for any expenses related to the Campbell-Thornton wedding scheduled for this Saturday. As I hit send on the last email, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time since my divorce 15 years ago, I was putting myself first, protecting what was mine instead of sacrificing it on the altar of maternal obligation. The doorbell rang, and I glanced at my watch. Probably the alterations person Ralph had mentioned, arriving with the dress I'd never asked for and no longer intended to wear. Instead, when I opened the door, I found myself face to face with Alexis. Her perfectly highlighted hair swept into a casual updo, designer sunglasses perched on her head. "Judith," she greeted me with air kisses. "I thought I'd come check on you. You left so early last night, we were worried you might be coming down with something." Her concerned tone didn't reach her calculating eyes, which assessed my expression for signs of the anger she clearly suspected I felt. "How thoughtful," I replied, not inviting her in. "I'm fine, just taking a day to process things." Her smile faltered slightly. "Process? Oh, you mean the beach house? I hope you're not upset about that. Ralph assured me you'd be thrilled to contribute to our special day." "Did he?" I tilted my head, studying the young woman who thought she was about to marry into wealth and privilege. "And what else has Ralph assured you of, Alexis? That I'd pay for your honeymoon? Your first home together? College for your future children?" Her smile became brittle. "Well, he did mention you've always been incredibly generous, that you understood the importance of family." "I do understand family," I agreed. "I'm just not sure you and Ralph do." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said softly, "that you should check your mail, Alexis. Both of you. I sent something special this morning." "Our wedding gift?" she asked, brightness returning to her voice. I smiled, thinking of the foreclosure notices and fraud allegations that would be arriving at their apartment via certified mail. In a manner of speaking. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have important business to attend to." As I closed the door on her confused face, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of standing up for myself, regardless of the consequences. The wedding was 3 days away, and I had just lit the fuse on a bomb that would blow it all sky high. Let them try to explain to 300 guests why the venue had canceled and the caterers weren't showing up. Let Ralph face the music when the beach house he'd sold turned out to be unsellable. My phone rang, Marcus from legal again. "Judith," he said without preamble, "we've filed emergency injunctions on the property sale and notified the buyers of the fraudulent nature of the transaction. But there's something else you should know." "What is it?" "We pulled Ralph's credit report as part of building our case. He's got almost $200,000 in credit card debt spread across 8 cards. 3 of them are in your name as an authorized user. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me, but it did." "Close those accounts," I said immediately, "and send me the full report. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with." "There's more," Marcus continued. "He took out a personal loan last year for $50,000 using your beach house as collateral, or what he claimed was your beach house. The paperwork is a mess, Judith. He's been playing fast and loose with your identity and assets for years." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Years? This wasn't a one-time desperate measure for a lavish wedding. This was a pattern of deception from the child I'd sacrificed everything for. "Do what you need to do, Marcus," I said, my voice hardened. "No more kid gloves." After hanging up, I sank into my chair, a new reality settling around me. This wasn't just about reclaiming my beach house anymore. This was about reclaiming my life from a son who had exploited my love at every turn. My doorbell rang again, probably the alterations lady this time. But I had no intention of wearing a mother-of-the-groom dress to a wedding that, if I had anything to do with it, wouldn't be happening at all. Ralph burst into my penthouse without knocking at 7 that evening, his face flushed with anger and panic. Behind him, Alexis hovered in the doorway, her earlier confidence replaced by poorly concealed anxiety. "What the hell, Mom?" Ralph shouted, waving a stack of papers. I just got calls from the venue, the caterer, the florist, everyone. They're all saying you've withdrawn funding and the wedding is off. I remained seated at my desk, outwardly calm despite my hammering heart. Good evening to you too, Ralph. I see you've received my messages. Is this some kind of joke? He threw the papers onto my desk, the foreclosure notices and legal documents Marcus had sent. Fraud allegations? Injunctions? What are you trying to pull? I'm not pulling anything, I replied evenly. I'm simply protecting what's mine. The beach house you sold? It wasn't yours to sell. It wasn't even mine, technically. It belongs to Campbell Enterprises. That's ridiculous, Ralph scoffed. It's your house. You've been using it personally for years. As a corporate perk, yes, but legally, it's owned by my company. Something you would have discovered if you'd bothered to check the property records before committing fraud. Alexis finally stepped fully into the apartment, her voice shrill. You're just trying to ruin our wedding because you're jealous. You can't stand to see Ralph happy. I looked at this woman, this stranger who was supposed to become my daughter-in-law, and felt nothing but pity. Alexis, I've spent 32 years trying to make Ralph happy. I've paid for his education, his apartment, his car, his lifestyle, even his credit card bills when he forgot to make payments. If I wanted to make him unhappy, all I would have needed to do was stop writing checks years ago. This isn't about money, Ralph insisted, though the panicked look in his eyes suggested otherwise. This is about you controlling everything, like always. Controlling? I repeated, genuine surprise in my voice. Is that how you see my support? As control? What else would you call it? He shot back. The constant check-ins, the questions about my career, the suggestions about my spending. It's suffocating. I studied my son, this handsome, entitled man who had once been my sweet little boy, and wondered where I had gone so terribly wrong. Ralph, I said quietly, I never asked for anything in return for my financial support, except that you live a good life. Be kind, work hard, find happiness. I didn't even insist you pursue a specific career or partner, so please, explain to me how my generosity became control in your mind. He faltered momentarily, then rallied. That's not the point. The point is you're trying to destroy my wedding over a misunderstanding about the beach house. A misunderstanding? I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. You forged my signature. You falsified legal documents. You sold property that wasn't yours. That's not a misunderstanding, Ralph. That's criminal fraud. You wouldn't press charges against your own son, he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. I already have, I replied softly. The paperwork was filed this afternoon. The color drained from his face. You're bluffing. Rather than argue, I turned my laptop screen toward him, showing the case filing in the county clerk's system. Ralph Campbell versus Campbell Enterprises and Judith Campbell. Fraud, forgery, conversion of property. Jesus, Mom, he whispered, sinking into the chair across from my desk. What are you doing? I'm doing what I should have done years ago, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I'm holding you accountable. Alexis moved to Ralph's side, her hand on his shoulder. Her expression had shifted from outrage to calculation. There must be some way to resolve this, she said, her tone suddenly conciliatory. We're family, after all. Family doesn't steal from family, I pointed out. Family doesn't forge signatures or falsify legal documents. It was a mistake, Ralph said, his earlier anger collapsing into desperation. I really thought you wouldn't mind, that you'd be happy to contribute to our wedding this way. By having my beach house stolen from me, the one thing I kept for myself after decades of putting everyone else first. We can find another way to pay for the wedding, Alexis interjected quickly. Scale back, maybe. Fewer guests. A different venue. I studied her, noting how quickly she'd shifted from righteous indignation to compromise when faced with the prospect of no wedding at all. This isn't about the wedding, Alexis. This is about trust and respect, both of which have been irreparably damaged. Ralph leaned forward, his expression earnest. Mom, please, we can fix this. I'll make it up to you, I swear. Just drop the legal stuff. Let the wedding go forward. We can figure out the beach house situation afterward. For a moment, one weak, maternal moment, I almost considered it. The pleading in his eyes triggered that primal instinct to protect my child, to smooth his path, to make everything better. Then I remembered the smug smile at the rehearsal dinner, the casual announcement of his theft presented as a fait accompli. The years of financial dependence masked as filial devotion. No, I said firmly. The legal proceedings will continue. The wedding funding has been withdrawn. The beach house sale is being reversed. And as of this morning, all financial support from me has ended, including your access to my credit cards, the monthly deposits to your checking account, and the trust fund disbursements I've been authorizing, despite the fact that the trust requirement stipulated employment as a condition. You can't do that, Alexis burst out, her mask of reasonableness slipping. The wedding is in 3 days. Everything's paid for. Actually, it's not, I corrected her. The final payments were due tomorrow. Payments I've informed all vendors will not be forthcoming. And the deposits you made with the funds from the fraudulent house sale? Those will likely need to be returned when the sale is invalidated. Ralph stared at me, genuine fear replacing his earlier confidence. Mom, you don't understand. We have people flying in from all over the country. Alexis's family has invited their entire social circle. We can't just cancel. You should have considered that before selling property that wasn't yours, I replied, surprising myself with my steadfastness. Actions have consequences, Ralph. It's apparently a lesson I failed to teach you, but you're learning it now. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This isn't over, he warned, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and panic. You want a war? You've got one. I don't want war, Ralph. I never have. What I want is respect for my boundaries, my property, and my autonomy, something you clearly don't understand. Come on, babe. Alexis tugged at his arm, her social mask completely abandoned now. We need to figure this out. My father knows people, lawyers. We can fight this. As they moved toward the door, I called after them. One more thing, Ralph. He paused but didn't turn around. Check your mail tomorrow, I said calmly. There's something you should see. After they left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, the confrontation replaying in my mind. I had expected to feel guilty or heartbroken after standing up to my son. Instead, I felt liberated, as if I'd finally put down a burden I'd been carrying for decades. My phone rang. Barbara, working late as usual. Judith, she began without preamble. Marcus briefed me on the situation. I've frozen all the accounts Ralph had access to and canceled the credit cards. I've also prepared a press statement in case this goes public, which it might, given the wedding's size and the Thorntons' social connections. Thank you, Barbara, I said, genuine gratitude in my voice. I don't know what I'd do without you. That's what found family is for, she replied quietly. Barbara had been with me for 15 years, through divorce and corporate battles and personal crises. She'd seen Ralph's entitlement grow, had witnessed my enabling of it, and had never once judged me for it. There's one more thing, I said, making a sudden decision. I need you to send a package to Ralph's apartment, certified mail, for delivery tomorrow. What kind of package? I smiled grimly, thinking of the evidence Marcus had compiled, the years of financial manipulation, the forged signatures, the fraudulent loan applications, the kind that ensures he knows exactly what he's facing if he continues down this path. After hanging up, I walked to my bedroom and opened my closet, pushing past designer suits until I found the garment bag in the back, the mother of the groom dress I'd purchased months ago, before I knew my son was capable of such betrayal. A simple, elegant sheath in pale blue that I'd been quietly excited to wear. I removed it from the bag and laid it on my bed, a tangible reminder of the celebration that would now never happen, at least not with me in attendance. Given Ralph and Alexis's determination, they might still cobble together some version of their wedding, though it would hardly be the society event they'd envisioned. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Jennifer Thornton, Alexis's mother. We need to talk. I stared at the message, considering my options. Alexis's family was old money, but cash poor, something Ralph had mentioned with disdain when they'd balked at contributing more to the wedding. They stood to lose social standing if the wedding imploded so publicly. I'm available for breakfast tomorrow. 9 a.m., the Pierre, I texted back, naming a public place where any conversation would need to remain civil. Her response came immediately. I'll be there. As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself wondering if I'd gone too far. If my righteous anger had pushed me to destroy not only my relationship with my son, but his future happiness as well. Then I remembered Marcus's words. He's been playing fast and loose with your identity and assets for years. This wasn't a desperate, one-time mistake. This was the culmination of years of entitlement and deception, and enabling it further wouldn't help Ralph. It would only postpone the inevitable crash when my resources or patience finally ran out. No, I decided as I turned out the light. I hadn't gone too far. If anything, I hadn't gone far enough years ago when the first signs of Ralph's entitled attitude had emerged. But it wasn't too late to correct course now, painful though it might be for both of us. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the meeting with Jennifer Thornton, the fallout from the legal proceedings, the inevitable social media storm when 300 wedding guests received cancellation notices. But for the first time in years, I would face those challenges as Judith Campbell, not just as Ralph's mother or his personal ATM. It was time to reclaim my life, my beach house, and my self-respect, even if it cost me my relationship with my only child. The Pierre's elegant breakfast room hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of silver against fine china. I arrived 15 minutes early, a habit from decades of business meetings, and secured a corner table with a view of both the entrance and Central Park beyond the windows. Jennifer Thornton arrived precisely at 9, immaculately dressed in a Chanel suit that had seen better days. Her blonde hair, the source of Alexis's golden locks, was swept into a chignon, and her posture radiated the kind of ingrained poise that comes from generations of finishing school education. "Judith," she greeted me with a cool nod, taking the seat across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Of course," I replied, equally formal. We had met only a handful of times during Ralph and Alexis's 2-year relationship, each encounter marked by polite distance. The Thorntons were Boston aristocracy, descendants of shipping magnates who had lost most of their fortune, but maintained their social standing through careful marriages and the strategic deployment of their remaining assets. Jennifer had never quite hidden her belief that Ralph, despite his Ivy League education and my financial backing, wasn't quite their equal in pedigree. A waiter appeared to take our orders. Tea for Jennifer, coffee for me, with pastries neither of us would touch. "I imagine you know why I wanted to speak with you," she began once we were alone again. "I can guess," I said evenly. "Your daughter came home with quite a story yesterday." Jennifer's perfectly manicured fingers tapped a light rhythm on the tablecloth. "Yes, she did. A rather alarming one, involving fraud allegations, cancelled vendors, and a beach house that apparently wasn't Ralph's to sell." "That's an accurate summary." "Judith," she leaned forward slightly, her voice lowered. "Is this really necessary? This public airing of dirty laundry? The wedding is 3 days away. Guests are already arriving from Europe." "I didn't choose the timing," I pointed out. "Ralph did, when he decided to sell my property without my knowledge or consent." "Men make mistakes," she said, a dismissive wave of her hand suggesting this was a minor transgression rather than a felony. "Especially young men in love. Surely there's a way to resolve this privately." After the wedding, I studied her carefully, noting the tension around her eyes despite her practiced calm. "Jennifer, let me be direct. Your daughter and my son conspired to defraud me of a significant asset to fund a wedding neither of them could afford. This isn't a misunderstanding or a youthful indiscretion. It's a crime." "A crime," she repeated, as if testing the word. "That's rather dramatic, don't you think?" "Not according to the district attorney's office, which has opened an investigation based on the evidence my company's legal team provided." The color drained from Jennifer's face. "You've involved the authorities? Over a family matter?" "Fraud isn't a family matter," I replied, keeping my voice level despite my growing irritation. "And frankly, I'm surprised you're defending their actions. Would you be so understanding if Alexis's trust fund had been raided without her knowledge?" Something flashed in Jennifer's eyes, a quick, calculating reassessment. "What exactly do you want, Judith? To punish Ralph? To humiliate Alexis? To assert your control?" "I want what was stolen from me returned," I said simply. "I want acknowledgement of the wrong that was done, and I want to establish clear boundaries with my son going forward." Jennifer sipped her tea, buying time. When she set the cup down, her expression had shifted subtly. "May I speak frankly, please? Alexis told me something interesting last night after their visit to your apartment. She said Ralph assured her you'd come around, that you always gave in eventually when he pushed hard enough." Jennifer's gaze was suddenly penetrating. "Is that true?" The question caught me off guard. I suppose I have enabled him in certain ways. More than certain ways, I suspect," she continued. Ralph has been living well beyond his means since college, from what I understand. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, that ridiculously expensive apartment in Tribeca. All on a salary that couldn't possibly cover half those expenses. I helped him, I acknowledged, discomfort creeping through me at having my parenting choices dissected by this woman I barely knew. He's my only child. I wanted him to have opportunities. Opportunities, Jennifer repeated. Or entitlement. I bristled. I don't think you're in a position to judge my relationship with my son. Perhaps not, she conceded. But I am in a position to judge the man my daughter intends to marry. And what I'm seeing concerns me greatly. This conversation was not going as I had expected. I had anticipated pleas for clemency, perhaps threats of social ostracism. Not this probing assessment of Ralph's character. What are you saying, Jennifer? She placed her napkin on the table and leaned back in her chair. I'm saying that while I came here intending to convince you to withdraw your legal actions and allow this wedding to proceed, I find myself reconsidering that position. You don't want them to get married? I asked, genuinely surprised. What I want, she said carefully, is for my daughter to marry someone with integrity, someone who solves problems honestly, not by stealing from his mother and expecting her to forgive him because she always has before. The blunt assessment stung, but I couldn't deny its accuracy. Ralph is capable of better, I said, though the defense sounded hollow even to my own ears. Is he? Or has he never needed to be because you've always been there to clean up his messes? We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling between us. I had come prepared for a confrontation with an adversary. Instead, I found myself facing an unexpected ally, one who saw my son perhaps more clearly than I had allowed myself to. What are you proposing? I finally asked. Jennifer straightened, business-like efficiency, replacing her earlier probing curiosity. I propose we allow this situation to unfold naturally. You continue your legal proceedings. The wedding is cancelled, or at least postponed until they can fund it legitimately. And we both observe how Ralph and Alexis handle this crisis. You want to test them, I realized. I want to see their true characters, she corrected. How they respond to adversity will tell us far more than how they celebrate in prosperity. Alexis won't be happy with you, I pointed out. A small, sad smile crossed Jennifer's face. No, she won't. But motherhood isn't about making our children happy in the moment. It's about guiding them toward becoming the best versions of themselves, even when that guidance is painful. The simple wisdom of her statement resonated deeply. Wasn't that exactly what I had failed to do with Ralph? Prioritizing his immediate happiness over the harder lessons that might have shaped him into a better man? There's something else you should know, I said, making a sudden decision to trust this woman who had shown unexpected depth. Ralph is in significant debt beyond what you might realize. Credit cards, personal loans, even some questionable financial moves involving my identity. The beach house fraud isn't an isolated incident. Jennifer nodded, unsurprised. I suspected as much. Alexis mentioned he's been handling all the wedding finances because he's good with money. A claim that seemed dubious given his lifestyle versus his actual income. If they do eventually marry, I said carefully, she would be taking on that financial baggage. And if the district attorney pursues charges, potentially a husband with a criminal record, Jennifer added, her expression grim. Neither prospect is what I envisioned for my daughter's future. We finished our breakfast in a strange, contemplative alliance, strategizing not as adversaries, but as two mothers concerned about the character development of our adult children. By the time we parted with a firmer handshake than the one we'd exchanged upon meeting, we had agreed on a united front. No interference with the legal consequences of Ralph and Alexis's actions, but continued open communication between us as the situation developed. One last thing, Jennifer said as we exited the restaurant. What was in the package you sent Ralph? Alexis mentioned something about him needing to check his mail. I smiled grimly. Evidence. Bank statements showing unauthorized transfers. Credit reports documenting accounts opened in my name without my knowledge. Loan applications with forged signatures. Everything Marcus's team uncovered during their investigation. Jennifer's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly. That should make for interesting morning reading. I thought he should understand exactly what he's facing if he continues down this path. Scorched earth, she murmured, a hint of admiration in her voice. I wouldn't have expected that from you, Judith. Neither would Ralph, I replied. That's precisely the problem. As I watched her slide into the back of a waiting town car, I felt an unexpected sense of validation. Jennifer Thornton, Boston aristocrat and arbiter of social propriety, had essentially endorsed my hardline stance against my own son. The weight of guilt I'd been carrying lightened slightly, replaced by the certainty that sometimes tough love was the only kind that truly mattered. Back at my office, I found Barbara waiting with a stack of messages and a concerned expression. "The Rosewood Resort called," she informed me as I settled behind my desk. "They want to know if they should proceed with wedding setup tomorrow or if the event is officially canceled. Apparently, Ralph has been calling them non-stop, assuring them the payment is coming. The event is officially canceled," I confirmed. "They can contact Ralph directly for any penalties or fees associated with the late cancellation." Barbara nodded, making a note. "Also, Marcus called. The district attorney wants to meet with you this afternoon to discuss potential charges." My stomach tightened, the momentary confidence from my breakfast with Jennifer faltering. Criminal charges against my son, my only child. "Judith?" Barbara's voice broke through my thoughts. "Should I tell him you'll be there?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Yes, schedule it. And Barbara, I think I'll need you to accompany me." "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "Always." The simple affirmation, so different from Ralph's conditional loyalty, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Barbara had been by my side through my divorce, through building Campbell Enterprises into a formidable company, through health scares and business triumphs. She had never asked for more than her salary and my respect, yet had given me unwavering support through every crisis. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything." She nodded, understanding passing between us without need for elaboration. "The car will be ready at 2 for the DA's office. And Judith, whatever happens, you're doing the right thing." As she left my office, my phone buzzed with a text from Ralph. "We need to talk. Now. Alone." I stared at the message, imagining him opening the certified package, seeing the mountain of evidence documenting his years of financial manipulation. His panic would be setting in now. The realization that this wasn't just about the beach house, but about a pattern of behavior that could have serious legal consequences. "I have meetings all day," I texted back. "I'm available tomorrow morning at 10. His response came immediately. "This can't wait. I'm coming to your office." Before I could reply, my desk phone rang. The reception desk downstairs. "Ms. Campbell, your son is here. He's quite insistent about seeing you. Security is asking if they should escort him up or turn him away." I closed my eyes briefly, weighing my options. Confronting Ralph in my professional space would maintain boundaries and prevent the emotional manipulation he'd perfected in more intimate settings. But it also risked a scene, something I'd spent decades avoiding at all costs. "Send him up," I decided. "And Janet? Alert security to stand by, just in case." "Yes, ma'am." 5 minutes later, my office door burst open as Ralph stormed in, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. His eyes were bloodshot, his expensive shirt wrinkled, his hair uncombed. In his hand, he clutched the file I'd sent him. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, slapping the documents onto my desk. "Credit reports? Loan applications? You're spying on me now?" I remained seated, maintaining the calm I'd perfected through countless business negotiations. "It's not spying when their accounts opened fraudulently in my name, Ralph. It's called protecting myself." "This is insane," he hissed, pacing in front of my desk. "You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal mastermind. I made a mistake with the beach house, okay? I admit that. But this?" He gestured at the file. "This is character assassination. Those are facts, Ralph. Documentation of financial decisions you've made using my name, my credit, my identity, without my knowledge or consent. I was going to pay it all back," he insisted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Once I got established in my career, once Alexis and I were settled. The same way you were going to replace my beach house someday," I asked, skeptically. "With what money, Ralph? You've been establishing your career for 10 years while living a lifestyle that requires 3 times your actual income." He collapsed into the chair across from me, suddenly looking very young and very frightened. "What do you want from me, Mom? To grovel? To beg? Fine, I'm sorry. I made mistakes, terrible ones, but don't do this. Don't send me to jail." The raw fear in his eyes pierced my maternal armor, triggering that primal instinct to protect my child regardless of his actions. For a moment, one weak, wavering moment. I considered calling Marcus, dropping the charges, finding another way. Then I remembered Jennifer's words at breakfast. Motherhood isn't about making our children happy in the moment. It's about guiding them toward becoming the best versions of themselves, even when that guidance is painful. I'm meeting with the district attorney this afternoon, I said quietly. There will be consequences for your actions, Ralph. Legal ones, financial ones, personal ones. But what those consequences look like, that's still being determined. Mom, please, he whispered, tears forming in his eyes. I'll do anything. Just don't let them arrest me. I studied my son, this man I'd raised, this person I'd failed in fundamental ways by shielding him too effectively from the natural consequences of his choices. I can't promise that, I replied honestly, but I can promise you this. Whatever happens, it will be with the goal of helping you become the man I know you can be, the man you should have been all along. Ralph stared at me as if I were a stranger. In many ways, I suppose I was. The mother he knew, the one who had bailed him out of every financial crisis, who had overlooked his increasingly entitled behavior, who had prioritized his comfort over her own boundaries, that woman was gone. In her place sat someone he clearly didn't recognize, a woman unwilling to sacrifice her self-respect on the altar of maternal obligation. You can't be serious, he finally said, his voice hollow. You'd let them prosecute your own son? Put me in jail? I'm not letting anything happen, Ralph, I replied, maintaining my composure despite the ache in my chest. These are the natural consequences of your actions. Actions you took willingly, repeatedly, over years. Everyone makes mistakes, he insisted, desperation edging into his tone. Mistakes are accidental, I corrected him. Nothing in that file was an accident. Every forged signature, every fraudulent application, every unauthorized transfer, those were deliberate choices. He slumped in the chair, the fight draining out of him. So that's it? You're just done with me? The question pierced deeper than he could know. Was I done with him? Could a mother ever truly be done with her child? I thought of Jennifer's measured approach, her willingness to let consequences unfold naturally as a test of character rather than a punishment. I'm not done with you, Ralph, I said softly. I'm done enabling behavior that hurts both of us. There's a difference. What am I supposed to tell Alexis? He asked, vulnerability replacing his earlier defensiveness. The wedding's in 3 days. Her family has people flying in from all over. We'll be humiliated. You should tell her the truth, I suggested. All of it. Not just the parts that paint you as a victim of your unreasonable mother. The unauthorized accounts. The forged documents. The mountain of debt you've accumulated. His eyes widened in alarm. I can't tell her that. She'd leave you? I finished when he hesitated. If the only thing holding your relationship together is her belief in your financial stability, then perhaps that's information she deserves to have before making a lifelong commitment. That's not fair, he protested weakly. Neither was selling my beach house without my permission, I countered. Neither was using my identity to secure loans. Neither was lying to your fiancé about your financial situation. We sat in tense silence for a moment, the weight of years of deception and enabling hanging between us. Through my office window, Manhattan stretched out in a panorama of ambition and consequence, a city that rewarded ingenuity but punished carelessness. I had navigated its ruthless landscape successfully for decades. Perhaps it was time Ralph learned to do the same, without using my resources as a safety net. The district attorney may be willing to consider a plea arrangement, I said finally, breaking the silence. One that includes restitution, community service, and financial oversight rather than jail time. Hope flickered in his eyes. You'd help me with that? I'll help you face the consequences of your actions with dignity, I clarified. I won't help you escape them. And the wedding? He asked tentatively. That's between you and Alexis. But it won't be happening at the Rosewood with my financial backing, and it certainly won't be funded by the fraudulent sale of my beach house. Ralph ran his hands over his face, reality finally seeming to sink in. Everything's falling apart, he murmured, more to himself than to me. The wedding, my credit, possibly my freedom, all because of one mistake. Not one mistake, I corrected gently. A pattern of choices that led you here. Choices you have the power to make differently going forward. He looked up, something new flickering across his features. A glimpse, perhaps, of the responsible adult he might have become without my excessive cushioning. What would that even look like? Starting over at 32 with nothing? You don't have nothing, Ralph, I said. You have an education, intelligence, charm when you choose to use it for something other than manipulation. And you have a mother who loves you enough to stop protecting you from reality. My intercom buzzed, Barbara reminding me of my approaching meeting with the district attorney. Ralph glanced at the phone, then back at me, the reality of his situation apparently hitting him anew. Will you call me after? He asked, his voice small. Let me know what they say? Yes, I promised. But Ralph, you need to prepare yourself, and you need to be honest with Alexis, today, because this isn't going away. He nodded slowly, gathering the scattered papers from my desk and returning them to the file folder. As he stood to leave, he hesitated, uncertainty written across his features. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I am sorry, not just for getting caught, for everything. The words sounded sincere, perhaps the first genuinely remorseful thing he'd said since this ordeal began. I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately needed to. But years of enabling had taught me to be wary of Ralph's well-timed contrition. Show me, I replied simply. Don't tell me. Show me with your actions going forward. After he left, I sat motionless, the enormity of what lay ahead weighing heavily on my shoulders. In a few hours, I would sit across from a district attorney and discuss criminal charges against my only child. I would hand over evidence that could fundamentally alter the course of Ralph's life. I would, in many ways, be complicit in his public downfall. And yet, a small voice inside insisted this was the most maternal thing I had done for him in years, not shielding him from consequences, but ensuring he faced them while he was still young enough to rebuild, still capable of learning the lessons that might transform him into the man he could be. Barbara appeared in my doorway, coat in hand, ready to accompany me to the district attorney's office. Her expression held no judgment, only quiet support. Ready? She asked. I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders and gathering my resolve. As ready as I'll ever be. The car ride downtown passed in contemplative silence. I watched the city blur past my window, thinking of all the battles I'd fought in boardrooms and courtrooms over the years. None had felt as consequential as this, a mother's stand not against her son, but for his character. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Thornton. Alexis just called, hysterical. Says Ralph admitted to financial irregularities and the wedding might be postponed. Progress? I smiled faintly at her businesslike assessment, typing back, perhaps, meeting with DA now. We'll update you after. Whatever happened in the next few hours, I was no longer alone in this painful recalibration of parental boundaries. And that, unexpected as it was, felt like its own kind of progress. The district attorney's office was exactly as uninspiring as one might expect. Institutional beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, and the faint smell of old coffee. Marcus met us in the lobby, his normally impeccable suit looking slightly rumpled after what had clearly been a long day of legal maneuvering. They're waiting for us, he said without preamble. I should warn you, Judith. The evidence is compelling. DA Hernandez is taking this quite seriously, especially given the dollar amounts involved. I nodded, steeling myself. And what are our options? Best case? Ralph agrees to full restitution, accepts felony charges, but gets a suspended sentence with probation and financial monitoring. Worst case? They push for jail time given the pattern of fraud. The word jail sent a chill through me despite my earlier resolve. Images of Ralph in a prison jumpsuit, surrounded by hardened criminals, flashed unbidden through my mind. Was I really prepared to let that happen? Barbara must have sensed my wavering because she placed a steadying hand on my arm. One step at a time, she murmured. Let's hear what they have to say first. DA Hernandez was a compact woman with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She greeted me with professional courtesy but wasted no time on pleasantries. Ms. Campbell, I've reviewed the evidence your legal team provided regarding your son's activities, she began, gesturing to the thick file before her. The unauthorized sale of corporate property is concerning enough, but the pattern of identity theft and financial fraud elevates this considerably. I nodded, maintaining my composure. I understand. What I'm trying to determine, she continued, studying me carefully, is whether you're fully committed to pursuing charges. These cases within families can be complicated. Emotions often interfere with the legal process. I'm committed to justice, I replied carefully. But I'm also a mother who wants what's best for her son in the long run. Those two things aren't necessarily in conflict. Hernandez leaned back, something like approval flickering across her features. Fair enough. In that case, I'd like to propose a potential resolution. For the next hour, we discussed parameters for a plea agreement, one that would hold Ralph accountable while offering him a path to redemption. Full restitution for all fraudulent transactions. Felony charges on his record, but with a suspended sentence contingent on strict compliance with financial monitoring. 2 years of probation. Community service focused on financial literacy education for at-risk youth. He'll need to surrender his passport, Hernandez added, and agree to regular check-ins with a probation officer. Any violation, no matter how small, would trigger the suspended sentence. And the beach house? I asked. The fraudulent sale? Already being handled by our real estate fraud division. The buyers will be informed that they purchased property through fraudulent means and the transaction will be reversed. They may have civil recourse against your son, but that's separate from our criminal proceedings. By the time we left the DA's office, a framework had been established, one that would require Ralph's cooperation and genuine contrition, but that would also spare him the worst consequences of his actions. Whether he would accept it remained to be seen. Outside on the courthouse steps, Barbara squeezed my hand. You did well in there, she said quietly. Firm, but fair. Did I? I wondered aloud. Or am I still protecting him, just in a different way? There's a difference between protection and destruction, Judith, she pointed out. You're offering him accountability with dignity. That's not enabling. It's wisdom. I nodded, grateful for her perspective as we made our way to the waiting car. My phone had been off during the meeting, and when I powered it on, a flood of notifications appeared. Missed calls from Ralph, texts from Jennifer, and a voicemail from an unknown number that turned out to be Alexis. Her message was tearful, but coherent. Ms. Campbell, it's Alexis. Ralph told me everything. About the fraud, the debt, all of it. I don't know what to say except, I had no idea. I swear I didn't know about the beach house until after it happened. Please call me back. Please. I played the message twice, trying to decipher whether her distress was genuine or performative. The Alexis I'd encountered previously seemed primarily concerned with appearances and social standing. This vulnerable, seemingly honest voice was unfamiliar. Are you going to call her back? Barbara asked as our driver navigated afternoon traffic. Not yet, I decided. I need to speak with Ralph first. When I called him, he answered on the first ring. Mom? What happened? What did they say? There's a potential plea arrangement, I told him, keeping my voice neutral. We need to discuss it in person. Can you come to my apartment at 7? Yes, he agreed immediately. Of course, anything. Mom, I told Alexis everything. She's not taking it well. I would imagine not, I replied dryly. Few brides dream of marrying a man facing felony fraud charges. That's not fair, he protested, though with less conviction than before. She's upset about the dishonesty more than the legal stuff. Says she can't believe I've been hiding financial problems from her all this time. Something in his tone caught my attention. A note of genuine surprise, as if Alexis's moral objection to his behavior was unexpected. Perhaps there was more substance to my almost daughter-in-law than I'd given her credit for. 7 o'clock, I reminded him. We have a lot to discuss. By the time Ralph arrived at my apartment that evening, I had reviewed the plea agreement details with Marcus twice, prepared a summary of financial restitution requirements, and fortified myself with a glass of wine and Barbara's unwavering support. She had offered to stay for the conversation, but this was one confrontation I needed to handle alone. Ralph appeared at my door looking like a ghost of himself, pale, drawn, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept since our earlier confrontation. The arrogant young man who had announced selling my beach house with such smug confidence had vanished, replaced by someone who finally seemed to grasp the gravity of his situation. The district attorney is offering a plea deal, I began, once we were seated in my living room. Felony charges, but with a suspended sentence contingent on strict compliance with probation requirements. No jail time, provided you meet all conditions. Relief flooded his features. Thank God. Mom, I held up a hand, stopping him. Don't thank me yet. The conditions are substantial. I laid out the plea agreement's terms with the same precision I'd use in a boardroom presentation. Each requirement articulated clearly, each consequence explicitly defined. As I spoke, I watched Ralph's expression shift from relief to dismay to something approaching genuine humility. Full financial restitution, I continued, consulting my notes. That means repaying every fraudulent charge, every unauthorized loan, plus interest and legal fees. The DA estimates the total around $230,000, not including whatever you received from the beach house sale, which will be nullified separately. $230,000? Ralph repeated weakly. I don't have that kind of money. Which is why the agreement includes a structured payment plan over 5 years, I explained. You'll also surrender your passport, submit to weekly financial monitoring, and complete 500 hours of community service teaching financial literacy at a youth center. He slumped in his chair, the magnitude of consequences finally seeming to sink in. And if I don't agree, then the DA proceeds with the full range of charges. Multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, falsification of documents, all with potential prison sentences. I don't have a choice, do I? He said quietly. You always have choices, Ralph. That's something I failed to help you understand earlier in life. I set my notes aside, meeting his gaze directly. The question is whether you'll finally make responsible ones. He was silent for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, I saw something in his eyes I'd rarely witnessed before. Genuine accountability. I'll do it, he said finally. All of it. And Mom, I really am sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I betrayed your trust. I don't expect you to believe me now, but I'm going to prove it to you, somehow. I nodded, not quite ready to accept his apology, but acknowledging the first step toward genuine remorse. There's something else we need to discuss, I said, shifting to the next difficult topic. The wedding. Ralph winced. It's off. Alexis called it off this afternoon after I told her everything. This surprised me, despite my conversation with Jennifer Thornton. Everything? The fraudulent accounts, the debt, the beach house. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. She was furious about the lying more than anything else, said she couldn't marry someone she couldn't trust. And how do you feel about that? I asked carefully. Devastated, he admitted, but also relieved in a weird way. Like maybe I don't have to pretend anymore. To be this successful, got-it-all-together guy when I'm actually drowning in debt and bad decisions. The simple honesty of his statement caught me off guard. Was this the same son who, less than 48 hours ago, had laughed about stealing my beach house? Alexis left me a voicemail, I told him. She sounded genuinely distressed. She is, Ralph confirmed. And confused. She thought we had this perfect life lined up. The fancy wedding, the Manhattan apartment, vacations in the Hamptons. Finding out it was all smoke and mirrors, it was a lot for her to process. And her parents? A grimace crossed his features. Her father wants to kill me. Her mother, strangely enough, seems almost, I don't know, validated, like she suspected something wasn't right all along. I thought of Jennifer's perceptive assessment over breakfast and suppressed a small smile. Mothers often do. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of all that had transpired, and all that was still to come, settling around us. Outside my apartment windows, Manhattan twinkled in the early evening darkness, indifferent to our family drama. What happens now? Ralph finally asked, his voice small. Now you sign the plea agreement. Meet with the probation officer. Begin making restitution. I paused, considering my next words carefully. And find a job that actually pays your bills rather than depending on me to cover the difference. He flinched at the blunt assessment, but nodded. My apartment lease is up next month. I won't be able to afford to renew it. No, I agreed. You won't. I could move in here temporarily? He suggested tentatively. Just until I find something affordable? The old me, the enabler who couldn't bear to see her son struggle, would have agreed immediately, eager to smooth his path despite his transgressions. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the disservice such help would be. No, Ralph, I said gently but firmly. That's not a healthy option for either of us. You need to stand on your own feet now, completely. Find a place you can afford on your actual salary, even if it's a studio in Queens instead of a luxury apartment in Tribeca. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded in resignation. I figured you'd say that. Can't blame me for trying, though. Old habits, I acknowledged with a small smile. For both of us. As Ralph prepared to leave, gathering the plea agreement papers to review with the attorney Marcus had recommended, he paused at the door. The beach house, he said hesitantly. I know the sale will be invalidated, but Will you ever let me visit there again? Someday, I mean, when I've earned back some trust. The question pierced me unexpectedly. The beach house had been my sanctuary, my one purely selfish indulgence in a life otherwise dedicated to work and parenthood. The thought of Ralph there now, after what he'd done, made me instinctively recoil. And yet, someday, I allowed. Not soon. But someday, if you demonstrate genuine change, perhaps. It wasn't much, certainly not the automatic forgiveness he might have expected from me in the past. But it was a small opening, a tiny window of possibility contingent on actions rather than promises. After he left, I poured another glass of wine and carried it to my balcony, gazing out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Thornton. Alexis has officially canceled the wedding. Vendors notified, guests being contacted. How did your meeting with Ralph go? I typed back, progress. Slow, painful progress. Her response came swiftly. The best kind. Dinner next week? I find myself unexpectedly free of mother of the bride duties. I smiled, appreciating her gallows humor in the midst of what must be a social nightmare for her family. I'd like that. As I sipped my wine under the stars, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past 3 days. My beach house stolen and reclaimed. A wedding canceled. Legal proceedings initiated against my own son. Boundaries established that should have been in place decades ago. And yet, amid the wreckage of old patterns and false securities, something new was emerging. A healthier relationship with Ralph, perhaps, built on reality rather than enabling. An unexpected friendship with Jennifer Thornton. And most importantly, a reclaiming of my own worth beyond maternal sacrifice. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. For Ralph, facing the legal and financial consequences of his actions, or for me, learning to love him without enabling his worst instincts. But for the first time in years, it felt like an authentic path rather than a well-worn groove of dysfunction. My phone buzzed again. Barbara checking in. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I replied truthfully. One day at a time. That's all any of us can do, she texted back. Proud of you, boss. 3 simple words that meant more than she could know. I had spent my entire adult life being Ralph's mother, measuring my worth by his happiness and success, learning to value myself independently, to be proud of my own choices rather than living through his, was perhaps the most profound change of all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The legal process would move forward. Ralph would begin the long journey of making amends and rebuilding his life on a foundation of truth rather than deception. I would reclaim my beach house, and with it, the peace I'd found there before his betrayal had temporarily tainted it. But tonight, under the vast indifferent sky, I allowed myself to simply be Judith Campbell, not just a mother, not just a CEO, but a woman reclaiming her life one boundary at a time. The next morning brought a flurry of activity I hadn't anticipated. My phone began ringing at 7 a.m. with calls from unfamiliar numbers. Wedding guests, I realized, seeking confirmation of the abrupt cancellation they'd received via email late last night. I let them go to voicemail, having no desire to explain the complicated truth to distant relatives and social acquaintances. Barbara called as I was finishing my coffee. You need to check the Post website, she said without preamble. Page 6 has picked up the story. My stomach dropped. How bad is it? Headline reads, Socialite wedding canceled after groom allegedly defrauds CEO mother. They don't have many details yet, but they mention the beach house and quote an anonymous source close to the bride, saying the wedding was called off due to shocking revelations of financial impropriety. I closed my eyes, imagining the social fallout. While I had been prepared for legal consequences, I hadn't fully considered how quickly this would become fodder for New York's insatiable gossip machine. Are they naming Ralph explicitly? I asked. Yes, Barbara confirmed. Both families, too. The Thorntons' Boston connections make this catnip for the society pages. Wonderful, I muttered. Just what we needed. After hanging up, I checked my email to find a message from Jennifer with the subject line, Damage Control. She had drafted a brief statement acknowledging the wedding's cancellation due to private family matters and requesting privacy during a difficult time. Acceptable? She'd written. My publicist recommends we present a united front. I sent back my approval, grateful for her pragmatic approach to the public relations nightmare. The statement wouldn't stop the speculation, but it might contain some of the more lurid theories that would inevitably circulate. My intercom buzzed, the doorman announcing a delivery. A few minutes later, I was signing for a large manila envelope from Marcus's office. Inside, I found the final plea agreement documents for Ralph's signature, along with a personal note from Marcus. D.A. Hernandez agreed to all terms. Ralph should sign ASAP before the media attention changes the political calculus. I texted Ralph immediately. Need to see you this morning. Legal documents ready for signature. Media has the story. His response was immediate. Saw the post. Coming over now. He arrived looking even more haggard than the previous evening, clutching a copy of the New York Post. The gossip column had been enlarged and printed on the front page of the tabloid, complete with photos of Ralph and Alexis from some charity gala months earlier. This is a nightmare, he said, collapsing onto my sofa. I've had 17 calls from wedding guests, 3 from work colleagues, and 1 from my boss asking if I'm being charged with a crime. Are you surprised? I asked, handing him the plea agreement documents. Actions have consequences, Ralph, sometimes very public ones. He took the papers with a resigned nod. I know. I guess I didn't think beyond getting caught by you. Didn't consider that everyone would know. Welcome to adulthood, I said, not unkindly, where our choices affect more than just ourselves. As he reviewed the documents, initialing each page with a heaviness that spoke volumes, I made a pot of fresh coffee. When I returned with 2 mugs, I found him staring at the final signature page. Once I sign this, I'm officially a felon, he said quietly. My life changes forever. Your life already changed, I pointed out, settling in the chair across from him. The moment you decided to sell my beach house fraudulently. This just makes it official. He nodded, then signed his name with a finality that seemed to physically deflate him. What do I do now? He asked, looking suddenly very young and lost. Practically speaking, I mean. The apartment? The job? The debt? It was the most adult question I'd heard from him in years, perhaps ever. Not, how will you fix this for me? But, how do I move forward myself? The distinction wasn't lost on me. First, you meet with the probation officer and financial monitor assigned to your case, I replied. They'll help establish a repayment plan based on your actual income. Second, you find an apartment you can genuinely afford, even if it's a significant downgrade. Third, you have an honest conversation with your employer about your situation. They'll fire me, he said glumly. Maybe, I acknowledged. Financial fraud isn't exactly a selling point for an investment firm, but hiding it would only compound the problem. He gathered the signed documents carefully, returning them to the envelope. Alexis texted me this morning. Said she's going to the Thorntons' place in Martha's Vineyard for a while to escape the media attention. A wise move, I agreed. Jennifer mentioned something similar yesterday. Ralph looked up sharply. You've been talking to Jennifer Thornton? We had breakfast yesterday, I said, seeing no reason to hide it. She's been surprisingly understanding about the situation. Understanding, he repeated incredulously. Her daughter just canceled her wedding because her fiancé turned out to be a criminal. What's to understand? Perhaps the fact that both of us raised children who valued appearances over substance, I suggested, who prioritized social standing over honesty. That's not fair to Alexis, Ralph protested. She didn't know about any of this. She's a victim here too. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his defense of the woman who had abandoned him at the first sign of trouble. Is that how you see her? As a victim rather than a co-conspirator? She didn't know about the fraud, he insisted. The beach house sale, yes. She knew I was handling that, but she thought it was legitimate. I'm the one who lied to her about having your permission. This was new information, and it forced me to reconsider my assessment of Alexis. Perhaps Jennifer's faith in her daughter's character wasn't entirely misplaced. In any case, I said, steering the conversation back to practicalities, you both need to weather this media storm as best you can. The plea agreement includes a gag order on the specific details, which should help contain some of the damage. Ralph nodded, rising to leave with the signed documents. At the door, he paused. Mom? Thank you. Not for bailing me out. You're not doing that this time, and I understand why. But I don't know. For still being here, I guess. For not completely washing your hands of me. The simple gratitude caught me off guard. For the first time in our confrontation, he was acknowledging my support without expecting it to absolve him of consequences. You're my son, Ralph, I said softly. That hasn't changed. What's changed is how I express my love for you. not by protecting you from consequences, but by helping you face them with dignity. After he left, I returned to my balcony with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the city awaken below. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I found a message from Alexis. "Ms. Campbell, I owe you an apology. I should have questioned where the money for our wedding was coming from. I should have been suspicious when Ralph suddenly had access to funds we hadn't budgeted. I didn't steal your beach house, but I benefited from its theft, and for that, I am truly sorry. I hope someday you might forgive me." The message surprised me with its maturity and directness. Perhaps Alexis, like Ralph, was capable of more substance than I'd given her credit for. I typed back, "Thank you for your apology, Alexis. We all have lessons to learn from this situation. I wish you well as you navigate your path forward." Setting my phone aside, I gazed at the Manhattan skyline, contemplating how quickly life could change. A week ago, I had been preparing, albeit reluctantly, for my son's extravagant wedding. Now, I was navigating a media firestorm, legal proceedings, and the painful reconstruction of my relationship with Ralph. Yet amid the chaos, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. The beach house would be mine again. Ralph would face consequences that might finally forge him into the man he could become. And I was reclaiming my identity beyond motherhood, one difficult decision at a time. My phone rang. Marcus with an update on the legal proceedings. Life moving forward, one step at a time. I took a deep breath and answered, ready to face whatever came next. 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, media speculation, and careful reconstruction of boundaries. The gossip pages had moved on to fresher scandals after a few days of breathless coverage, leaving behind only the occasional reference to the Campbell-Thornton wedding debacle in society columns. Ralph had signed the plea agreement, met with his probation officer, and begun the humbling process of financial disclosure that would govern his life for the next 2 years. His employer, an investment firm understandably concerned about having an employee charged with financial fraud, had placed him on indefinite leave, effectively firing him without the public embarrassment of an outright termination. I had maintained a careful distance, neither abandoning him nor rushing to smooth his path. Our interactions were brief, purposeful, and increasingly authentic, a new dynamic for both of us. On a crisp Friday morning, Marcus called with news I had been waiting for. "The beach house is officially yours again," he announced, or rather, Campbell Enterprises again. "The sale has been reversed, all documents nullified, and the property records corrected." Relief washed through me, more powerful than I had anticipated. "And the buyers?" "Pursuing civil action against Ralph personally, as expected," Marcus confirmed. "But they've been made whole financially, with interest. Their quarrel isn't with you or the company." "Thank you, Marcus," I said, genuine gratitude in my voice, "for everything." "Just doing my job," he replied modestly. "Though I must say, watching you stand your ground these past weeks has been inspiring. Not many parents would have had your resolve." After hanging up, I sat at my desk, contemplating what came next. The beach house was mine again, but the violation of its sanctuary remained a raw wound. Would I still find peace there, knowing what had happened? Or would Ralph's betrayal have permanently tainted the one place that had been purely mine? There was only one way to find out. I called Barbara into my office. "I'm going to the Hamptons for the weekend," I told her. "Hold my calls unless it's an emergency." She nodded, understanding without need for explanation. "The beach house is yours again?" "As of this morning." "Good," she said simply. "Reclaim it, Judith. Don't let what happened change what that place means to you." The drive out to the Hamptons was familiar yet strange, colored by the knowledge of what had transpired. As I turned onto the quiet road leading to my property, I half expected to see strangers in the driveway, remnants of the fraudulent sale not yet fully excised. Instead, the house stood as it always had, a modest but elegant cedar-shingled cottage perched on a dune overlooking the Atlantic, my sanctuary, my one indulgence. Mine again, in every sense. I parked and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I took the keys from my purse, the originals I had kept even after Ralph's theft, and approached the front door. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it during my last visit, months earlier. The furniture remained draped in protective covers, the kitchen pristine and untouched, the bookshelves still lined with my collection of novels and biographies. The buyers, it seemed, had never taken possession beyond the paper transaction. I moved through the rooms slowly, reacquainting myself with each space, running my fingers along familiar surfaces. In the master bedroom, I opened the French doors to the oceanside deck, breathing in the salt air and listening to the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Thornton. Heard the good news about the beach house. A victory worth celebrating. Dinner still on for tomorrow night? Over the past 2 weeks, Jennifer and I had developed an unexpected friendship, bonding over shared experiences as mothers of adult children navigating consequential mistakes. Our weekly dinners had become a highlight amid the legal and emotional turmoil. Yes, I replied, looking forward to it. I'm at the beach house now. How does it feel? She asked. I considered the question, searching for the right words. Like reclaiming a piece of myself, I finally typed. Hold on to that feeling, came her response. It's hard-earned. As evening approached, I uncovered the furniture, opened windows to the ocean breeze, and prepared a simple dinner from provisions I'd brought. Sitting on the deck with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson, I felt the tension of recent weeks begin to ease. This place had always been my refuge, the one space where I was neither CEO nor mother, but simply Judith. Ralph's betrayal had temporarily stolen that sanctuary, but being here now, I realized the beach house's power came not from its physical structure, but from what it represented. My right to prioritize my own needs, to create boundaries, to exist independently of others' expectations. My phone rang, Ralph's number appearing on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, preserving this first evening of reclaimed peace. But something in me, perhaps the new honesty I was cultivating in all my relationships, compelled me to answer. Hello, Ralph. Mom. His voice sounded different, less entitled, more measured. Marcus told me the beach house transaction was officially reversed today. I wanted to say I'm glad that it's yours again, where it belongs. The simple acknowledgement, offered without excuses or expectations, caught me by surprise. Thank you, I said after a moment. That means something, coming from you. Are you there now? He asked. Yes, I confirmed. Just for the weekend. Is it the same? Does it still feel like your place? The question revealed an awareness I wouldn't have credited him with weeks earlier, an understanding of how his actions might have damaged not just the legal ownership of the property, but its emotional significance to me. I'm working on that, I answered honestly. Some things can't be undone, Ralph, but they can be healed, with time and effort. I hope so, he said quietly, for the beach house and for us. After we hung up, I remained on the deck, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Ralph's journey toward genuine accountability had only just begun, and there would inevitably be setbacks along the way. The entitlement and manipulation that had characterized our relationship for decades wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that something better might eventually emerge from the wreckage of our old patterns, something built on mutual respect rather than dependence and enabling. As darkness settled fully over the beach, I made a decision. Tomorrow, after breakfast, I would walk to the small local real estate office and inquire about properties in the area. Not to replace this beach house, but to find a second one, a fresh start untainted by past betrayals. Not because I was abandoning this sanctuary, but because I was finally embracing the truth that I deserved not just one space that was wholly mine, but as many as I chose to create for myself. For too long, I had measured my worth by what I sacrificed for others. Now, as I listened to the waves crashing against the shore, I understood that the most valuable gift I could give to myself and to Ralph was the courage to stop sacrificing what mattered most. My beach house was mine again. And more importantly, so was my life. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my new beach house, watching waves crash against the shore as morning sunlight danced across the water. Unlike my first property further down the coast, this one was perched on a rocky outcropping, offering dramatic views and a sense of solitary grandeur that suited my new perspective. It's breathtaking, Jennifer remarked, joining me with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Our weekend retreats had become a tradition over the past months, a friendship neither of us had anticipated, but both now cherished. Worth every penny, I agreed, accepting the coffee gratefully. Though my financial advisor nearly had a stroke when I told him I was purchasing a second beach property, Jennifer laughed. The benefits of being answerable only to yourself. That was the heart of it, really. The freedom I'd claimed since standing up to Ralph. The first beach house remained mine, its sanctuary slowly healing from the violation of his betrayal. But this new place represented something different. Not recovery, but growth. A choice made not in reaction to loss, but in celebration of possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Barbara. Quarterly reports finalized. Everything looking strong. Enjoy your weekend off. In the months since Ralph's plea agreement, Campbell Enterprises had thrived under my refocused leadership. Freed from the constant drain of enabling my son's lifestyle, I had channeled that energy into strategic initiatives that expanded our market share and increased profitability. The board had noticed, approving performance bonuses for the entire executive team. Any word from Alexis? I asked Jennifer, who was scrolling through her own messages. She's settling into the London office nicely, Jennifer replied. The transfer was exactly what she needed, a fresh start away from the gossip and speculation. After the wedding cancellation, Alexis had retreated briefly to Martha's Vineyard before requesting a transfer to her company's London branch. The move had proved transformative, giving her space to rebuild her identity beyond Ralph Campbell's jilted fiancé and the society pages that had feasted on the scandal. And Ralph? Jennifer asked carefully. How is he managing? I sipped my coffee, considering the question. Making progress. Slow, uneven progress, but progress nonetheless. The past 6 months had been a crucible for my son. After losing his investment firm job, he had struggled to find comparable employment with a fraud charge on his record. Eventually, he had secured a position at a small financial literacy nonprofit, ironically similar to the community service his plea agreement required, but now as a legitimate job. His Tribeca apartment was long gone, replaced by a modest one-bedroom in Astoria. His BMW had been sold to make restitution payments. His credit cards were limited to a single secured card with a $500 limit, carefully monitored by his probation officer. It was a humbling existence compared to his former lifestyle, but one he was gradually adapting to with more grace than I would have expected. He's asked to visit the original beach house, I told Jennifer, voicing the dilemma that had been weighing on me recently. Not to stay overnight, just for dinner. Says he wants to apologize properly in the place where it all began. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. And you're considering it? I am, I admitted. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined allowing him back there. But now you're secure enough in your boundaries that his presence won't threaten them, she finished for me. Something like that, I agreed. The question is whether it's too soon for him, not for me. Is he genuinely remorseful, or is this another manipulation? More subtle than before, but manipulation nonetheless. Jennifer considered this, her gaze on the horizon. Does your gut tell you he's changed? Parts of him have, I said carefully. He's living within his means for the first time in his adult life, taking responsibility for his mistakes, actually listening when others speak, instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. But 32 years of entitlement doesn't disappear in 6 months, I acknowledged. I still see flashes of the old Ralph, the expectation that rules should bend for him, the subtle attempts to bypass consequences. So test him, Jennifer suggested simply. Set clear conditions for this visit. See if he respects them. It was the practical advice I'd come to value from our friendship, neither sentimental nor cynical, but grounded in reality and careful observation. I think I will, I decided. Later that evening, after Jennifer had departed for her drive back to the city, I called Ralph. About your request to visit the beach house, I began without preamble. You've thought about it? He asked, hope evident in his voice. I have, and I'm willing, with conditions. Name them, he said immediately. First, it's a day visit only. You arrive at noon, you leave before sunset. Second, you come alone. No friends, no dates, no one else. Third, you respect my space. No wandering through rooms uninvited, no presuming familiarity you haven't earned back yet. I waited for pushback. The negotiation he would have automatically attempted 6 months ago. Instead, there was a pause. Then, those are fair terms. I accept them. When? The simple acquiescence surprised me. Next Saturday, I decided. I'll text you the details. After we hung up, I walked along the shoreline of my new property, contemplating the shifting dynamics with my son. We were building something different now, not the enmeshed, enabling relationship of the past, but something with clearer boundaries and more honest communication. Whether it would ever fully heal remained to be seen. Trust, once broken, could be repaired, but always bore the marks of its fracturing. Yet for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that Ralph and I might eventually find a new equilibrium, not as financier and dependent, but as two adults navigating the complex territory of family bonds reconfigured by difficult truths. The following Saturday, I arrived at my original beach house early, preparing a simple lunch and ensuring the space felt both welcoming and clearly mine. At precisely noon, Ralph's car, a used Honda Civic that represented his new financial reality, pulled into the driveway. He emerged looking both familiar and changed. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple khakis and a button-down shirt. His hair was shorter, his posture less entitled, but somehow more grounded. He carried a small gift bag and a bouquet of wildflowers, not the extravagant arrangements he once would have ordered, but something he might actually have selected himself. "Mom," he greeted me on the porch, offering the flowers somewhat awkwardly. "Thank you for allowing this." "Come in," I said, accepting the bouquet. "Lunch is ready." As we ate on the deck overlooking the ocean, our conversation remained careful, but not stilted. Ralph updated me on his job, his apartment, his compliance with the probation requirements. I shared news of Campbell Enterprises, my friendship with Jennifer, and carefully edited details about my new beach property. After lunch, he handed me the gift bag. "It's not much," he said, a flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "Nothing like what I used to give you, but it's honest." Inside, I found a small hand-carved wooden box. When I opened it, a familiar melody played, the same lullaby I had sung to him as a child. "I made it," he explained, the flush deepening, "in a woodworking class I'm taking at the community center. Part of my, trying to develop skills instead of just spending money." The simple gift touched me more deeply than any expensive trinket he had ever presented, not because of its monetary value, but because it represented actual effort, actual thought. "It's beautiful," I said simply. "Thank you." As the afternoon progressed, we walked along the beach, maintaining a physical and emotional distance that felt appropriate to our healing, but still damaged relationship. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Ralph glanced at his watch and then back at the house. "I should go," he said, honoring the boundaries I had set without requiring my enforcement. "Thank you for today, for giving me a chance to see this place again, and to apologize properly for what I did." I nodded, acknowledging both his apology and his respect for my terms. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated on the porch steps. "I heard through the grapevine that you bought another beach house, further up the coast." "I did," I confirmed, not asking how he had learned this information. "I'm glad," he said, surprising me again. "Not because this place was tainted by what I did, but because you deserve to have as many spaces as you want that are just yours. I understand that now, I think. What I took from you wasn't just property, it was sanctuary." The insight revealed a level of reflection I wouldn't have credited him with a year ago. "Yes," I agreed simply. "It was." As his car disappeared down the driveway, I returned to the deck, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The visit had gone better than I dared hope. Not perfect, not completely healed, but a step in the right direction. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "How did it go?" "Better than expected," I replied. He respected the boundaries. "Seems to be gaining genuine insight. One day at a time," came her wise response. I smiled, tucking the phone away and returning my attention to the sunset. One day at a time indeed, not just for Ralph's redemption journey, but for my own path of reclaiming myself beyond motherhood. The beach house was fully mine again. My company was thriving. I had developed friendships and interests independent of my identity as Ralph's mother. And most importantly, I had learned that love, real love, not enabling or codependence, sometimes meant standing firm while someone you cared about faced the natural consequences of their choices. As darkness settled over the water, I raised my wine glass in a solitary toast to boundaries respected, to sanctuaries reclaimed, and to the unexpected strength that emerges when we finally stop surrendering our own needs to others' demands. My beach house, my life, my terms, at last.